Yeah, cults can appear in several different forms. I feel as though we are stereotyped to feel that they are usually in some old converted church or compound out in the middle of nowhere, isolated from society. And while there have been famous examples of that being the case, the simple fact of the matter is that isn't always true. And the early signs of indoctrination are not always what you would expect them to be. It doesn't have to start with some religious nut being like, hey, you want to pray to the giant meatball on Mars? Or some other absurd example like that. Cantelmoism doesn't simply begin with one man going out and saying, hey, I am starting a cult. After all, I don't feel that many cults start that way. Cults can find themselves and their origins popping up anywhere, even somewhere as unsuspecting as social media. And one such website that has had a cult form on it is that of Reddit. I'll be the first to admit Reddit isn't a website I'm all that familiar with. Sure, I've sunk several hours into Reddit no sleep, reading horror stories late at night, and occasionally, if I get stuck on a video game or something, I'll go to Reddit for advice. But overall, it is a website I'm not on all that much, so if some of my terminology or anything is wrong, please forgive me in that regard. But for those that don't know, Reddit is a website in which users can post on various different forums called subreddits. These subreddits are like groups for different things. For example, I mentioned earlier that I was on No Sleep, that is for telling fictional horror stories. There are also subreddits for things like Star Wars, Dark Souls, other examples that aren't as nerdy. Football, bands, you name it, and there's likely a subreddit for it. You can basically post on these subreddits pertaining to whatever the interest of it is, and with that, you can speak with like minded individuals about it. For example, if I want to talk about old horror movies, I could go to a subreddit about that and start typing about it, and would find other people that like old horror movies, and we could have a discourse about it. So, with that very brief and simplified introduction to Reddit, let's dive into how a cult was formed on Reddit. And it doesn't start off on a forum that you might think. I want to point this out here. We will be sharing a lot of bizarre ideas in this video, a lot of things involving religion, medical things. I am not saying that I believe any of the ideas presented by this cult, Cantelmoism. I am simply here to share them and educate the viewer on those. So YouTube, I am not saying to do all the things that this cult says to do. We are here for educational purposes. So please, don't get mad at me. Anyways, just wanted to throw that out there. My time here on YouTube has been great. I just don't want them to, just pull the plug because they think I'm some conspiracy nut. I talk about conspiracies. We don't necessarily believe in them. So all of this really begins back in 2020. The story of Cantelmoism begins with a user called Chris CGC. This user became famous on Reddit for giving out awards. Reddit awards are given from one Redditor to another, basically to say they like what they posted. Oftentimes, these Reddit awards come with little bonuses, such as getting Reddit Premium for a while, and they cost real world money. So getting one shows that someone liked your post enough to pay real world money to show that they enjoyed it, and oftentimes give you an award for it. The thing is though, Chris CGC gave out a ton of these awards. Like, a ton. We're talking thousands of dollars of Reddit awards just being dished out on the daily to people that either interacted with Chris CGC or just that he liked their stuff for. In fact, for a lot of people, it became a running gag to say, if you want Reddit gold, get in touch with Chris CGC and he'll give it to you. Chris became so famous on these subreddits that he actually had a subreddit made dedicated to him called Children of Chris. Now, this doesn't sound like a bad thing. It is just a guy spreading cheer on Reddit. He presumably has the means to do so, and why not make some people's day a bit better? Where it gets a little concerning, though, is on the subreddits that he posted to. See, the main two subreddits that Chris would frequent were dank memes and teenagers. Now, some of you might be thinking, why is this concerning? And to understand that, we kind of need to understand cults. While right now this does not seem like a cult, it is important to note that most cults starting off don't seem like cults. It's a common misconception that just stupid people join cults. And while I'm not saying stupid people haven't joined cults, that's not usually the reason why. See, where cult leaders usually strive off of is getting vulnerable people to join their cults. This usually leads to people being down on their luck joining cults, as they have no one else to turn to, and there's seemingly this person greeting them with open arms, telling them everything's gonna be okay if you just come with me, practice my beliefs, it'll be super cool, we'll have a great time and we'll get you back on your feet. But this, of course, usually snowballs. It starts off as something small as we'll go pray together or whatever the cult might entail. And from there, it goes on to, murdering people. Basically, it has a snowball effect. It starts small, then gets a little worse, then a little worse, then a little worse, then a little worse, and before you know it, we're doing bad things. So, how does that go into this user, Chris CGC, on Reddit? Well, it's not just people that are down on their luck that would be perceived as vulnerable to cult leaders. Chris is in the subreddits of teenagers and dank memes. Teenagers, obviously, would target teenagers as their users, young kids, whereas dank memes is likely a similar age group of younger people, not saying, those of us that aren't teenagers or kids won't be on dank memes, but there is still a good chance of finding some kids on dank memes. These individuals are likely young and naive, meaning that it is not too hard for a cult leader to come in, basically start spreading their influence, and at the very least planting the seeds, if not recruiting them to join their cult. And that is exactly what Chris was doing by giving everyone gold. And the funny thing is, that's not even a conspiracy or me thinking, oh, this was his master plan. He admitted it. So, because of Chris's generosity on Reddit, people wanted to learn more about him. Who was this user? Why did he spend so much on Reddit awards for strangers? Heck, if people just asked for it, they'd get a Reddit award. What's the reasoning behind that? Was it simply just a good Samaritan? Or was there more behind it? And the answer to that question would be answered when an interview was done with Insider Meme Trading. That is one of the best names ever. And this is where we learn who Chris CGC really is. Chris CGC's real name was Chris Cantelmo. Chris was by all means a very smart individual. He was a Yale graduate and a very successful biochemist. For a time, he was the president of an American branch of a company called GL Sciences. This was a career he was able to get into thanks to his biochemistry degree, and it allowed him to become a very wealthy man. This is where he is able to fund all the awards that he gives out. For the most part, Chris seemed to be a very normal guy who simply worked hard and it paid off for him in life. However, sometime in his 50s, things began to get weird. See, it is around this time that Chris was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And it's here that the story gets weird, but I'm gonna let Chris explain it in his own words. So on the subreddit DMT, Chris shared a post, the title of which is, I am morally obligated to reveal my secret. The following is what he said. Major new natural treatment for all cancers. I've been involved in a secret study of a new cancer treatment being undertaken by Mexican doctors with the funding of the Chinese government. I have brain tumors that have been successfully treated with DMT inhaled via vaporization. I was sworn to secrecy, but now that I know that the supplement is a miracle drug, I cannot in good conscience keep the secret any longer. American pharmaceutical companies know about this natural, human, and plant based supplement, and they have been trying to create a version that they can patent before you find out that DMT is a cancer treatment and cure. American pharmaceutical companies do not want to cure your cancer. Their goal has been, and always will be, to keep you alive with cancer so they can make as much profit as possible. Your well being is of zero concern. DMT is also a natural, endogenous human neurotransmitter made by our pineal gland. Our body stops producing the chemical at puberty. One can naturally reactivate DMT production by the pineal glands in adults by staring into the sun for a few minutes each day, starting in morning and early evening and working up to bright sunlight hours. Our government, particularly the military and the intelligence communities, has a huge stockpile of DMT to be used against enemy attackers since DMT created short lived, 2-minute kaleidoscope visualizations when administered via vape pen or intravenous injections, so it's viewed as a non lethal way to immobilize troops. So, for one, I want to apologize if I butchered the pronunciation of any of those words. I did my best. But basically, what Chris is saying is that he believes that DMT is the cure for cancer, and also that we should be staring at the sun. a lot. So this should come as no surprise to no one, but believe it or not, I am not a medical expert. I make videos here on YouTube. And while, sure, he is correct in that big pharmaceutical companies do just want to make money off you, I'm not sure DMT's the way to go about curing cancer. Once again, not a medical expert, but I would just advise you to listen to your doctors or just, not people on Reddit about medical advice. I'll leave it there. So Chris has that belief that DMT cures cancer and that we should all be looking at the sun and whatnot. So how does that tie into giving out a bunch of Reddit awards? Well, he reveals in the interview with Insider Meme Trading that the reason that he shares all these Reddit awards and has all these people coming to him on Reddit and following him and basically becoming a Reddit celebrity where people can listen to him is so that he can grow a platform in which he is successfully able to share this opinion with everyone. Basically, the Children of Chris subreddit, while starting off as people's way of saying thanks for the gold, to Chris was a way of starting Cantelmoism, his self proclaimed title of his new religion, in which DMT cures cancer. Yes, he made this belief a religion. So now that the cat is out of the bag, essentially, that he isn't just doing this to spread Reddit gold, we get to hear more about his beliefs with this. He believes that people should be taking DMT 3 to 10 times a day, regardless of if they have cancer or not. This is just for their day to day health, like vitamins. It should come as no surprise that he does not trust things like radiology or chemotherapy for curing cancer, because as he says, it did not cure his cancer, DMT did. And sure, while radiation and chemotherapy are certainly not fun stuff to have in you, it has been proven that these things work, which leads to one of the biggest things against Chris is that his ideas are harmful. And again, I'm not a doctor, but these ideas are certainly harmful in the fact that not only are they giving people potentially false negative advice, but it's also giving people false hope. Think about it, if a treatment isn't working for someone and they hear about this guy online who says, "That's wrong, I have this," that could be giving someone false hope that ultimately is for nothing. And some of the people going through these illnesses are in a vulnerable state, and his ideas are dangerous to both their mind and their health. But regardless of the fact that people kept calling him out for this and whatnot, there were some that believed him. He had some followers that were there because they believed that DMT cured cancer. And his reach wasn't just on Reddit. By this time, he had enough of a following of people that weren't just there for the gold, as there were a lot of people that really were just there for the Reddit awards. I wouldn't even say the majority of people that were on the Children of Chris subreddit or anything actually subscribed to the DMT cures cancer belief, but there were still a good amount of people that did. And Chris's accounts and subreddits started getting banned because of the dangerous and misleading medical information that he was giving out. So, because of this, he went where no one can stop him, his own website. This website is, of course, called Cantelmoism.com. Now, it is on this website, on the front page, that there is a tab that says Discoveries of Chris Cantelmo, and this has a list of many of the things that Chris believes about his religion and his view on the world. Number 1, there is a God. Number 2, God emits a cosmic broadcast of electromagnetic waves. Number 3, humans and all other living creatures with a nervous system can receive information from God's cosmic broadcast, while their neural network is enabled by DMT. Number 4, instinctual behavior in animals results from the behavioral instruction delivered to each organism via the cosmic broadcast. Imagine that each species has its own decryption key, so it interprets the cosmic data set according to its own specific behavioral needs. Number 5, aliens are now present on Earth and hyperactive in an effort to save the Earth from environmental disaster. The aliens have recognized Chris Cantelmo as the only human well versed enough to speak to the hearts and minds of every type of human. Aliens have demanded Chris to deliver the aliens' message: stop polluting and warmongering and overpopulating, or we will unleash an unstoppable plague and lethal worldwide epidemic. Number 6, Einstein's energy equation needs to be updated to E equals 4/3 pi mc cubed. 7. The second law of thermodynamics is wrong. The universe is getting increasingly organized and energetic, and its end state is already determined as a super complex wonder world. 8. Free will in humans is an illusion, and the end state of every living thing follows suit. The consequences of this fact is anxiety should evaporate, since our individual actions are irrelevant to the final outcome at all times. People should do the most enjoyable thing at every waking moment. 9. The nervous system of all living creatures is both a computer and an antenna, which both broadcasts and receives electromagnetic waves. DMT enables the Wi-Fi and increases the clock speed of the bio-CPU by quantum orders of magnitude above the default mode of normal adult human brain function. 10. There is a DMT cycle in mammals, in which DMT and sex hormones are inversely proportioned. The higher the level of sex hormones, the lesser the quantity of DMT produced by the pineal gland in the brain. DMT production is stopped altogether in humans at puberty and reinitiated in late adulthood. 11. The mental health syndromes called schizophrenia and autism are one and the same and result from a relative overabundance of bioavailable DMT. From here on, these syndromes can be unified as autophrenia. Autophrenics are geniuses and are created by God to be leaders of humanity, and lesser normal adults were too stupid to see this in modern times. In ancient times, autophrenics were rulers. 12. Shakespeare, Galileo, Da Vinci, and all historical geniuses, and probably Jesus himself, were autophrenics. 13. Moses was either autophrenic or inhaled DMT released by a burning acacia bush, and saw spirits and received God's messages. 14. Our modern industrialized world, particularly fluoridation of our water supplies, and being told not to stare at the sun, has resulted in a calcification of our pineal glands and an interruption of the natural DMT cycle. Staring at the sun and drinking deionized pure water rejuvenates pineal function. 15. Adding DMT to an adult brain via orally active ayahuasca or by vacuuming DMT crystals allows people to see the spirits which are always around us but otherwise invisible, including a multitude of guardian angels voluntarily assigned to each of us. 16. Near-death experiences occur when the CO2 levels in the brain get so high that the pineal gland releases what is believed to be the final dose of DMT into the brain, which is meant to enable our souls to be delivered back to God. This is why almost all near-death experiences, people report seeing angels and aliens. 17. Nitrogen narcosis in scuba divers and anyone who breathes compressed air results from DMT being released in the CO2-enriched oxygen-starved brain. 18. The euphoria delivered by laughing gas at the dentist or by doing whippets is created by the release of DMT by the brain. If you want to do DMT but do not have access to the chemical, just inhale nitrous oxide and you will get a sense of the DMT experience. 19. DMT has allowed Chris Cantelmo to unify the four fundamental forces in physics into one force: electromagnetism. The weak nuclear force, the strong nuclear force, and gravity are all manifestations of electromagnetism over distance. The only reason the notion of multiple forces originated is because gravity and its effects was clearly understood by everyone. When electricity was discovered later, it was assumed to be a separate force. A look at the force equation for electromagnetism and gravitation shows that they are identical. There is no such thing as gravity waves, and the LIGO detectors detect tectonic plate movements, not gravitation. Kip Thorne, a Nobel Prize winner for his LIGO project, is an uber genius, but was led astray by the notion that gravity is a separate force. 21. Modern medicine and vaccines only make our immune systems weaker and are the source of all human suffering. God gave all the immunity we need, and medical intervention should only be undertaken in life-threatening emergencies. Vaccines are the problem, not the solution. 22. A direct experience of God is vital and essential. All religions are formed after a charismatic human has God revealed through an experience with DMT. Religions fail by claiming exclusivity of the divine. Religion is a source of evil, as certain as it is a force for enlightenment. 23. Money is the ultimate source of evil and results from greed. Money allows people the luxury of treating others poorly. When money is eliminated, peace will be restored to Earth. 24. Darwin's natural selection occurs at the species group level, not the individual level, and this explains altruism, heretofore a mystery to evolutionary biologists and psychiatrists. 25. Freud and Jung were well-meaning but wrong. The subconscious does not exist. Dreams foreshadow future events, and when that future event happens, we feel a deja vu. 26. When matter is created by condensing light waves into particles, matter stays with us to the present, and antimatter recedes into the past. Matter and antimatter are reunited at the end of the universe. 27. If Chris Cantelmo isn't the second coming, is anyone capable of so being? 28. Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead rule. Play Dark Star. So there's a lot to take in right there. Basically, some of the key takeaways, at least stuff I could kind of understand, is that Chris not only believes that DMT cures cancer, but also acts essentially as a doorway into God's true world, full of spirits and angels and guardian angels and all that fun stuff. Basically, it allows the human mind to ascend to a godly plane. He also believes that aliens are here and have chosen Chris to almost be an interpreter for them. And the aliens have some good messages in Cantelmoism. They want us to quit polluting and fighting each other and all that, so that's great. But Chris also thinks he was chosen by both the aliens and God because he is the only person that can successfully spread this message to humanity as the second coming. And then just some more surface level conspiracy stuff, like they shouldn't put fluoride in the water. I guess we should be staring at the sun. He also believes that people with autism and schizophrenia, especially people who have both, are essentially a super race of humans who are destined to lead. I believe that is honestly because clearly he thinks very highly of himself and his position, as he believes he is the second coming, as we just stated. But Chris also did have schizophrenia, and while I can't find anything, I don't think, given what he says about people with autism and how he perceives himself, especially given that he has schizophrenia and how he perceives that as well, I'd say it's safe in assuming Chris has autism as well. Basically, he's saying with that he is, of course, since he's the second coming, he also is the, what do you call him? Autifrenic person, part of that super race. So with all those beliefs, I think it's very clear that Chris, though certainly intelligent, is an ill man, which was likely compounded by his extreme use of DMT, which allows him to see all sorts of things as he is on a DMT trip. And I think it's because of this that he basically interpreted that as all this religious beliefs that he has, be it with aliens, angels, sprites, spirits, all sorts of things. I think at the end of the day, Chris was just a mentally ill man. I don't think that Chris was spreading all this potential misinformation to be harmful. I think he genuinely was trying to help. However, it is hard to say that when we look at the true downfall of Cantelmoism. See, as was stated way earlier in this video, one of the main points that Chris had for his religion was that DMT cured cancer. Regardless of if you believed that he was chosen by God or the Messiah or anything like that, he said take DMT to cure cancer. And this was because, as he stated in that Reddit post way back, it worked for him. He had brain tumors, he took DMT, and it cured his cancer. But the simple fact of the matter is that's not true. And that's not me being cynical and saying there's no way. Chris admitted as such in one of his videos. Chris has a YouTube channel in which he further explains a lot of his views on the world and his opinions and such. And in one of these videos, he says as much, that he never had cancer, or at least not medical cancer, because he says that he had the cancer of atheism.
before anyone wants to like do an expose on me about cancer, I never had brain cancer. I never had, as far as I know, I had never had any form of cancer. But I do believe that ayahuasca, DMT will cure it. It will cure all your diseases. I know that for a fact. I had the worst form of cancer, atheism, and DMT cured that.
Chris says in that video he doesn't have cancer. And while he would later come back and rebut that statement and say, oh, he did have cancer, once you say it once that you were lying and then people kind of call you out on that lie and you start backpedaling, it's already been established by that point that the lie was a lie. Chris really tried to hold on to relevancy with his cult. At one point on Twitter, he faked his death just to see how people would react, and this was ultimately to gain sympathy from his followers. However, when Chris revealed that he was in fact alive, one of his followers had a really big issue with that and called him out on it. Chris did not take this well and proceeded to harass this individual. So much so that this person had to get a restraining order against Chris. However, Chris ignored this restraining order and tried to call this individual's boss to get him fired. This would be done by telling him about the employee's experience with DMT and whatnot, and that's just not cool. Now, unfortunately, our story does have a sad ending. On November 24th, 2020, Chris Cantelmo was found dead on a hiking trail. It is believed that he took his own life. Why he did this is unknown, as he never left a note. Well, much of the ideas that were presented in this video were ultimately probably negative and potentially harmful. Someone taking their own life is still very upsetting, and may Chris rest in peace. This is where a conspiracy comes in, though. Chris dedicated much of his time to trying to out Big Pharma, saying that all their treatments don't work and that they know DMT does work to cure cancer. So there is a conspiracy that since there was no note left behind, that big pharmaceutical companies ended up killing Chris. However, this doesn't have a whole ton of weight to it, as he didn't have a ton of followers and was ultimately just kind of perceived as a crazy person by the internet. Sure, you could argue Big Pharma did do this, and I'm all for conspiracy theories, but this, I just really don't think this one has that much behind it. And that is basically the end of our story. Cantelmoism was definitely a cult, though maybe not in the traditional sense that we think of. We usually think of cults as being more ritualistic or, murdery or all that stuff. But Chris's was done online, which could perhaps show a new danger for cults. We all know the old stranger danger phrase and to be careful while you're on the internet. But I don't think we think about often how that can be used for cults. And maybe we should more. Ultimately, this cult could have done a lot more harm than it did. At most, it just led people astray on their medical advice, which is certainly a very bad thing, as medical advice is very important and you should really only listen to professionals or those in the know. But I think it's good that this cult did not get too out of hand and, ended up being like a murder cult or something like that, because that could have been a lot worse. But that is pretty much going to do it for today's video. Once again, I'm not saying do any of the things I said in that video. I am just telling you about this rabbit hole that I found online and found interesting. So, I do want to have a quick announcement. I did actually make a social media. I know on some of the last few videos, people were asking if I had one, and I didn't, but I do now. So, here it is, right here. You can find me on Twitter. I don't really use Twitter much in my personal life. I probably won't a whole lot going forward, but just for little updates that maybe the YouTube community post just wouldn't be appropriate for, or just little things about interests and stuff, just so you guys can kind of know a little bit more about who you're watching. The only thing I've posted at the time of recording this is a picture of a Warhammer miniature I'm painting, because yes, I'm really as nerdy as I look, but I don't know, I thought it was cool, so figured why not share it. Yeah, so I know some of you have asked about that, so I figured I'd let you know here that I've got that made, and it's ready. If you want to follow me, great. If not, you won't be missing out on much. I won't post there all that often. But yeah, thanks again so much, everyone, for watching. I apologize of the big gaps between updates. I'm working on a huge video coming up. Hopefully, it'll be the next video out, but it was supposed to be out before this video, but it was just taking too long, and I already had this in the works in the background, so I figured I'd finish this up before I got that done. It'll be a lot of fun to make. I'm having a blast making it. It's about creepypastas, so if you're into that, if you liked my Ted the Caver video and whatnot, you should have a great time with that one. So yeah, hopefully I get that done soon. If not, there might be another video out before that, but I promise I am working hard in the background of things. Lastly, thanks a ton for everyone's support and all that stuff. You can do all the usual YouTuber stuff if you want to, like, comment, subscribe, all that. You don't have to. But, yeah, just thanks a ton, guys, and I hope you all have a great day.